Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world where inventions flow like ink across silk, and emperors scribble commands with brushes made from rabbit fur. You're in a candlelit chamber tucked behind a lacquered screen, and the air smells faintly of pine soot and dried plum blossoms. Someone grinds a stick of black ink on a stone slab with slow, circular motions, turning water into velvet black liquid. There's no sound but the whisper of silk sleeves and the soft rasp of brush against paper. You're not in some Renaissance studio or Enlightenment lab. You're in China, centuries before much of the world even imagined such things. You're about to trace the story of invention after invention that the world didn't just envy, but never saw coming. And frankly, if you had to compete with this kind of brilliance, you probably wouldn't survive either. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from tonight, and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin with ink. Not on the fountain pen variety. Not even the ballpoint kind that skips when you're trying to sign a receipt. No, this ink is solid. You hold it in your hand like a carved brick of black incense. The room is quiet as you dip your brush, watching the color bloom on paper, made from mulberry bark and old rags. This ink, called Mo, dates back to at least 256 BCE. It's carbon-based, made from soot collected off burning pine, then mixed with animal glue and molded into elegant, sculpted sticks. When ground on an inkstone with water, it becomes a deep velvety black that clings to paper like spilled night. You can't erase it. You don't want to. Artists and scholars treat it like sacred matter. The texture, the density, even the smell, it's ritual. Whole dynasties built reputations on their ink formulas. Some recipes include pearls, musk, and even gold dust. Others involve drying the ink under the full moon to enhance its spirit. Historians still argue whether these rituals were just poetic flair or had actual alchemical merit. But hey, if it works, it works. Now picture this. You're in a scholar's studio in the Tang Dynasty. A boy no older than 12 is hunched over, brushing characters onto silk. Not paper, silk. Paper hasn't caught on yet. Each character has to be perfect. A misstroke is an insult to the ancestors. Meanwhile, someone else is etching the same words into bamboo slips, painstakingly binding them with string to form scrolls the size of your thigh. And here you are, just trying not to sneeze on the silk. Here's the twist. This ink isn't just for pretty poems or imperial decrees. It's used to create early printed images, to stamp official seals, and even to draw talismans believed to protect against ghosts and thunder spirits. One popular practice, writing Buddhist sutras in gold ink on black paper to please celestial deities. Imagine that hanging in your dorm room. And yes, there were street vendors selling calligraphy. You'd see them hunched on alley corners, whipping out couplets for weddings or ink painting a dragon with 3 bold strokes before lunch. The ink was portable, affordable, indelible, kind of like a Sharpie. If the Sharpie had 1,000 years of philosophical weight and was occasionally made from ground pearls, here's a weird one for you. During the Song Dynasty, there were tales of magical inks, ones that glowed in the dark or changed color depending on the reader's emotions. Sounds outlandish? Maybe. But in an age where Taoist monks brewed immortality elixirs and court physicians tracked meridian flows with jade probes, it doesn't feel that far-fetched. Some inks were toxic, intentionally so. Poison ink was rumored to be used in political intrigue. Write a letter, wait for someone to lick their thumb to turn the page, and let's just say the succession line got simpler. Historians still argue whether any emperor actually died that way, but it's juicy enough to show up in a few palace records. And here's the kicker. While the Western world was still mashing berries into pigment and signing scrolls with goose feathers, Chinese ink had already evolved into an entire industry, refined, exported, and revered. The ink stick wasn't just a tool, it was a status symbol. Gifting someone a box of ink sticks was like handing them a Mont Blanc pen crossed with holy incense. You lean over now and add your own mark to a paper fan. The characters glisten, then fade into matte black. You're not just writing, you're part of a 2,000-year-old artistic lineage. Every stroke you make is a quiet rebellion against the idea that the West invented progress. And tomorrow, we move on to paper. You're not ready for how big that gets. The first time you see paper, it doesn't look like much. A crumpled sheet drying in the sun, pale and uneven, pasted to the side of a wooden frame with bits of bark still clinging to its surface, but hold it up to the light and it glows like soft ivory. You run your fingers across it, light as dried flower petals, yet strangely resilient. You've just touched something that's about to change the world, and no one outside China will understand how for centuries. You're in the Han Dynasty, around 100 CE, standing beside a man named Kai Lun. He's a court eunuch, not the most glamorous title, granted, but tonight, he's moonlighting as one of history's most important inventors. He's been fiddling with a slurry of old fishing nets, bark, hemp rags, and even scraps of old shoes, trying to find something smoother than bamboo slips, lighter than silk, and less breakable than dried palm leaves. Eventually, he hits on the magic mix. He pounds it to a pulp, filters it through a screen, and lays it flat to dry. When he lifts it, it's thin, flexible, and just rough enough to grip ink like a dream. Congratulations, you're witnessing the creation of true paper, Zhi, spelled Z-H-I, the Chinese word for paper, and you didn't even have to get your hands wet. Before this, writing was a hassle. Want to draft a love letter? Better start carving bamboo? Need a copy of the tax code? Hope you've got 10 oxen to carry your scrolls. Even silk, while beautiful, was absurdly expensive. Emperors wore it. Peasants didn't write on it. Paper democratized writing. Suddenly, bureaucrats could file reports. Poets could record heartbreak. Students could fail exams in triplicate. And here's where it gets really spicy. Paper doesn't stay a secret. Not for long. After the Battle of Talas in 751 CE, Chinese papermakers are captured by the Abbasid Caliphate. Whoops. The tech leaks west, and within a few decades, paper mills pop up in Samarkand. By the 11th century, it's in Baghdad. But Europe? Oh no. Europe is still scratching on animal skin, centuries behind, probably wondering why their books cost more than houses. Historians still argue whether Kai Lun truly invented paper from scratch, or merely perfected an older technique. There's evidence of paper fragments as early as the 2nd century BCE. Maybe he got the idea from somewhere else. Maybe not. What we do know is that he standardized it, refined it, and sold it like the stationary equivalent of sliced bread. And did it catch on? Fast? Like wildfire. The imperial court loved it. Poets adored it. Monks started copying sutras with feverish devotion. By the Tang Dynasty, paper wasn't just for writing, it was for wrapping food, for folding fans, for kites, even for paper armor in a pinch. Don't ask how well that held up. Let's talk about recycling. Modern society likes to brag about sustainability, but you're standing next to a 10th century paper maker who's already turning rag scraps and fishing nets into fresh paper sheets with zero waste. No bleaches, no plastic coatings, just old fibers, sun, and patience. One curious story from the Song Dynasty tells of a wealthy merchant who demanded all his account records be written on paper, scented with crushed orchids and lotus. You flip one open, and yes, it smells like money and insecurity. Meanwhile, Taoist alchemists are making spirit money out of paper to burn in offerings to ancestors, ensuring the afterlife is fully funded. Paper's not just practical, it's spiritual. It becomes a bridge between worlds as letters to the dead, prayers folded into cranes, imperial edicts announcing new eras, and, occasionally, grocery lists. But you want a bit of fringe weirdness? How about this? Some early experimenters made paper out of wasp nests? Yes, wasps. They noticed the insects crafting papery hives and thought, that's an idea. No one quite agrees whether it worked well, but the fact that they tried, iconic. And now, imagine you're a monk in a remote Buddhist monastery. You spend your days copying scripture with aching fingers onto hundreds of sheets of this miraculous stuff. You press a wood block to the page and make another copy, and another, and another. You're not just preserving knowledge, you're mass-producing enlightenment. All because of paper. Later on, in the Ming Dynasty, even more uses explode. Paper umbrellas, window panes, armor linings, fake currency for offerings. And let's not forget toilet paper. Yes, we're getting to that in section 18, but let's just say it all starts here. Your fingers are smudged now. The ink has dried. The paper holds your thoughts in a way no bamboo slip ever could. It's flimsy, sure, but it lasts. You roll it up, slide it into your sleeve, and suddenly you're carrying the future. And next, you'll see what happens when someone decides to make 50 copies of the same idea in a single afternoon, because paper may change the world, but printing breaks it wide open. You're sitting in the quiet corner of a candlelit room, watching a craftsman ink up a slab of wood carved with thousands of tiny characters, each one backward, as if meant for a mirror. He lays a thin sheet of paper across it, smooths it gently with a brush, and peels it off. The ink has transferred perfectly. He sets the fresh page aside, reaches for another. You blink. He's made a book page in less than a minute. Welcome to the era of block printing, and it's about to make everything noisy. You live in a time when writing out a book means weeks, even months, of copying by hand. Imagine copying the entire art of war or Diamond Sutra with nothing but a brush and a spine prone to spasms. But with block printing, suddenly, that aching monk in the corner gets a break. You just carve it once and print forever. Lazy genius level unlocked. The Chinese perfected woodblock printing by the 7th century CE and by the Tang Dynasty. It's gone from novelty to necessity. The oldest known printed book in the world, the Diamond Sutra, was produced in 868 CE. It's delicate, beautiful, and the ancient equivalent of pushing Chiral plus C, Chiral plus V on your beliefs. You lean over and try it yourself. The block is heavy, carved from pear wood, the characters precise and raised. You press the paper, Peel it back. It's messy. Ink blob. The craftsman sighs and hands you another brush. Again, he says, "You're not a genius yet. But here's what makes your heart race. This isn't just for religious texts or philosophical essays. Soon, merchants are printing invoices, schools are printing textbooks, farmers are printing almanacs. Even temples start mass-producing charms promising good harvests and better in-laws. Historians still argue whether this actually increased literacy among the lower classes, but it certainly brought ideas out of the scroll-locked elite halls. You want something a little more underground? Here's a fringe tidbit. During the Song Dynasty, some printing shops sold books with risque poetry, maybe a few illustrated romantic scenes. Yes, the world's first print shops were also home to the world's first mass-market guilty pleasures. The past was just as curious as the present. Block printing also births the early concept of propaganda. You see government decrees posted in marketplaces. You see morality tales spread like wildfire. You see Taoist priests printing entire catalogs of divine punishments, just in case the peasants need reminding that tax evasion does have cosmic consequences. And let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer logistics. A single page could take days to carve. Hundreds of characters. One wrong cut, and the whole block's ruined. And still, print houses produced thousands of copies. There's even a tale of a young boy who memorized entire Confucian classics simply because his father owned a shop and used the same blocks over and over again. You stroll through a Song Dynasty city and pass shop after shop stacked with bundles of fresh pages. One vendor sells printed games. Another, fold-out paper maps. A third offers DIY fortune-telling kits, complete with printed instructions and tiny woodcut illustrations of celestial goats. At night, you hear stories about haunted printing blocks, ones that keep stamping images of forgotten ancestors long after the carver has died. One monk swears he saw a block that changed characters depending on the reader's karma. A little spooky, a little poetic. Completely believable after your third cup of plum wine. Of course, Europe doesn't catch on for centuries. Gutenberg's movable type revolution comes in the 15th century. But by then, China's already been there, done that, and has the woodcuts to prove it. Historians still argue why movable type, also invented in China by Bai Sheng around 1040 CE, never fully replaced block printing in its homeland. Some say it's the complexity of Chinese characters. Others say it's about tradition, or maybe, just maybe, carving entire philosophical truths into a block of wood feels more permanent. You run your fingers across the printed page. It's a Buddhist sutra, reprinted 10,000 times. The ink's still warm, the words eternal. And just when you think the world can't get any more advanced, someone pulls out a spoon that always points south, even when you spin in circles. Time for you to meet the compass, before compasses were cool. You're standing in the middle of a misty pine forest, somewhere in the 4th century BCE, and someone hands you a spoon. Not just any spoon, this one's made of magnetite, polished to a mirror sheen and shaped like a ladle. It sits atop a square bronze plate, engraved with markings you can't read 'em now, but they definitely mean something. You give the spoon a little spin, and like magic, it settles with the handle pointing due south. Welcome to the ancient Chinese south-pointing spoon, your first encounter with what will one day become the compass. Except right now, it's not for maps, it's for metaphysics. This isn't a tool to find North America. Not yet. Right now, you're using it to align your city gates with the cosmic order. To plan tombs that mirror the stars, to ensure your house isn't cursed by a misaligned beam, and yes, to figure out which direction you should be sleeping to avoid nightmares. Because when you're living under heaven's mandate, directions matter more than you'd think. The Chinese discovered natural magnetism long before the rest of the world. The earliest records of lodestone date back to the Guiguzi, a text attributed to a warring state strategist. They noticed that these strange black stones attracted iron, and when floated on water or shaped into a spoon, they mysteriously turned toward the same direction every time. You try it yourself, balancing a fish-shaped piece of magnetite on a reed, letting it float in a bowl. It wiggles, twitches, and settles south again. The water ripples slightly, like it knows something you don't. By the Han Dynasty, scholars are obsessed. They build elaborate devices like the Sinan, literally south pointing, and to help them read geomantic forces. These aren't sailors' tools yet. They're more like divination instruments, built to harmonize with the Tao. And yes, historians still argue whether these early devices were actually used for practical navigation or remained mostly ceremonial. But the moment someone realizes this strange spoon could work at sea, that changes everything. You're on a Song Dynasty junk now, sails taut with wind, the smell of salt in your hair. In your hand, a compass. It's no longer a spoon but a floating needle, suspended over a silk-covered board marked with directions. You tap it, and the needle quivers, then points south with a confidence that borders on smug. Chinese sailors are now navigating murky waters and mist-wrapped coasts with ease. Before this, most maritime travel hugged the shoreline like a nervous swimmer. But with a compass, you can cross open water, you can brave monsoon fog, you can even navigate at night, assuming you don't mind the occasional Kraken hallucination. There's even a legend of Zheng He's fleet carrying massive compasses on board during his 15th century voyages. Not just one, several, backup compasses. That's how serious it gets. Some were dry, others floated in oil to reduce needle jitter. You hold one and feel like you're holding a piece of pure certainty in your palm. And here's a lesser-known quirk. Some ancient compasses didn't point north, but south, because in Chinese cosmology, south is the direction of warmth, growth, and positive energy. The emperor sat facing south, after all, so naturally, your tools would do the same. But the true mindbender? These early Chinese compasses were often more accurate than their European counterparts for centuries. While others were still figuring out magnetic declination and accidentally sailing to the wrong continent, Chinese navigators were running scheduled trade routes between Southeast Asia, India, and Africa. No big deal. And then there's the mystic compass, a fringe favorite among conspiracy theorists and late-night historians. Some stories claim that Taoist monks built compasses aligned not just to magnetic forces, but to the key of the earth itself, using buried jade and tortoise shells to tune the needle to spiritual vibrations. Is it true? Probably not, but it's delicious to imagine. One tale tells of a general using a pocket-sized compass during a battle in the mountains. He sets up an ambush based purely on directional flow, trapping his enemies between two valleys. It works so well. He names his new strategy, the Spoon's Whim. The court thinks he's mad. He gets promoted anyway. You wander through a street market in Hangzhou and see compass makers selling everything from scholar's desk models to sailor-grade floating boxes. One has the 8 trigrams etched in gold, Another comes with a miniature incense holder, so your spiritual alignment is always on point. And what about the rest of the world? The Islamic world gets wind of it first, using it for desert navigation. Europe doesn't fully adopt it until the 12th or 13th century, and even then, they still think it might be powered by devilry. Meanwhile, you're sipping tea and casually aligning your teacup with the magnetic south. You close your hand around the spoon. You're not just navigating space, you're navigating meaning. And as the stars shift above and the fog lifts from the pine trees, you feel something ancient tilt gently in your chest. But don't get too philosophical yet. You've got bricks to carry, and no one's doing it faster than you, thanks to a one-wheeled miracle that the Romans never saw coming. You wipe the sweat from your brow and grip the handles of a curious contraption, a single wheel in the middle, two wooden arms stretching back like the horns of a bull, and a flat platform perfectly balanced above it. On that platform, a pile of bricks, firewood, or, on an unlucky day, a particularly judgmental goose. Congratulations. You're piloting the Chinese wheelbarrow. And no, the Romans didn't think of this one. It looks simple enough. But the moment you start pushing, you feel it. The load glides like magic. Balanced. Effortless. Almost smug in its efficiency. You're moving more weight faster than any two people dragging a sled. And the best part? The wheel is under the center of the load. Not at the front, like later European versions. It's not just clever, it's genius. This marvel shows up in written records as early as the 1st or 2nd century CE, likely during the Han Dynasty. It's called a luce, or deer cart, though it doesn't look like a deer, unless that deer's had a very long week. Some historians believe it was inspired by earlier two-wheeled carts, but placing the wheel under the center gave it supernatural handling. You steer it with your body. You feel like part of the machine. And it's not just for hauling stuff. You see old men using it to carry produce, soldiers wheeling supplies up mountain passes, even traveling doctors with entire apothecaries strapped to the frame. Some models had canopies for rain. Some were rigged with sails to catch the wind. Yes, historians still argue whether those sail barrows actually worked. But there's a Song Dynasty woodblock print that shows one zooming along with a monk on board looking a little too relaxed. Your favorite tale? A general named Zhuge Liang is said to have used wheelbarrows to silently transport troops behind enemy lines. Not just one or two, but entire regiments on wheelbarrow-based stealth missions. Whether myth or military masterstroke, the legend persists, and the uses don't stop at war. Farmers love them. So do bricklayers. At one point in the Tang Dynasty, the city of Chang'an employs entire wheelbarrow trains, dozens of laborers moving in synchronized flows, transporting materials for construction projects that would put modern city planning to shame. You pass a bamboo forest, where an elderly woman is loading firewood onto her wheelbarrow. It creaks a little, but it's held together with leather straps and iron nails, and she maneuvers it like a dancer. You ask how long she's had it. She shrugs. Longer than the emperor's latest wife. Some elite models even had decorative carvings, dragons, phoenixes, poetic inscriptions about the dignity of labor, because even when you're hauling manure, you deserve a little elegance. You crouch beside one and examine the wheel. It's iron-rimmed, set in a wooden fork that turns with a whisper. You wonder how many miles this thing has rolled, how many lives it's lifted. And then it hits you. Europe doesn't figure this out until roughly 1,000 years later. Their version comes with the wheel at the front, which is somehow less stable, more backbreaking, and yet still earns the name innovation. You sigh and push your barrow down the road, past people who barely glance at you. To them, it's just a tool. To you, it's a revolution in motion. You stop to drink tea. Your arms are sore, but your back, surprisingly fine. That's the genius of the wheelbarrow. It redistributes weight. It redefines effort. It quietly makes the impossible portable. And just when your day starts to feel too peaceful, boom. Literally. Because someone just tried to make an elixir of immortality and accidentally invented gunpowder. You're standing in a dim alchemist's chamber that smells like boiled toad and desperation. Shelves grown under jars of bat feces, sulfur crystals, and ground minerals with names like dragon's bone and phoenix hair. The goal tonight? Eternal life. The result? A loud pop, a singed beard, and the accidental birth of gunpowder? The story goes something like this. During the Tang dynasty, around the 9th century CE, Taoist monks searching for immortality did what any self-respecting mystic scientist would do: mix random flammable things together and hope for transcendence. One such recipe combined saltpeter, potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur. Instead of immortality, they got a fireball. The irony? Too rich to ignore. You lean in and examine the scroll where the mixture was first written down. The ink warns, "Heed it not, lest your hands be scorched and your house consumed," which is ancient Chinese for "Do not try this at home." You grin. Naturally, someone tried it again. And again. Soon, someone notices that the mixture burns faster than anything else. Someone else thinks, what if we put this in a bamboo tube and light it? Welcome to the age of fireworks, which, hilariously, arrives before the age of firearms. Celebrations in imperial courts start lighting up the sky with colorful rockets long before Europe even has glass windows that open. Fireworks aren't just pretty, they're spiritual. Loud bangs chase away evil spirits. Colored flares symbolize prosperity. The emperor watches from a silk-draped pavilion as dragons of light swirl above the forbidden city. Children cheer. You flinch slightly, because even now, that pop still hits your survival instincts. But eventually, someone starts thinking bigger. By the 10th century, military minds repurpose this magical powder for something far less festive. They invent fire arrows, bamboo tubes filled with gunpowder, strapped to regular arrows and ignited just before launch. The Mongols take this idea and run with it, literally. By the time of the Song dynasty, Chinese engineers have created proto-rockets, flame-spitting spears, and even early grenades made from cast-iron shells. You watch a demo. A soldier lights a fuse, ducks behind a wooden screen, and a thundering whoosh sends a projectile flying across the training field. It bursts mid-air in a puff of sparks. The general nods, unimpressed. Add more powder. You raise an eyebrow. More? The fire lance is next. Essentially a handheld flamethrower. Bamboo tubes packed with powder, mounted to spears, spitting flames and shrapnel for a few seconds. You're told it's meant for shocking cavalry, but you suspect it's mostly for terrifying everyone involved. It works. The genius of Chinese gunpowder weapons lies in experimentation. They're not content with one device. They create landmines, triggered by tripwires. Chain-fired arrows launched in a deadly fan pattern. oxen-drawn carts that deploy rows of fire lances like a medieval version of a tank. It's wild, it's brilliant, it's chaotic, and it predates European gunpowder warfare by centuries. Historians still argue whether gunpowder spread westward via the Silk Road or through Mongol invasions. Either way, by the time Europeans are lighting fuses on clunky cannons, the Chinese have already developed multi-stage rockets and chemical variations that burn different colors. Of course they did. And here's a quirky side note. In some Buddhist texts, gunpowder is described as having a playful spirit that resists control. One monk even writes, "It dances with the wind and eats the hands of fools." You're not sure if that's a metaphor or an accident report? Possibly both. In the marketplace, you see fireworks sold in tiny clay pots. Children giggle. Older women light them to celebrate new grandchildren. And street performers use them in tightrope shows. Gunpowder is everywhere. In celebration, in warfare, in funerals, in rebellion. You pause before a temple where paper offerings burn in a small brass cauldron. The smoke curls skyward. Somewhere behind the structure, a firework launches. It spirals upward, bursts in a ring of gold. People cheer. It's beautiful. It's explosive. And it was never meant to happen. You shake the ash from your sleeves. And now, from fire to earth, from bang to tremble, what if you could detect an earthquake before it arrived? In the 2nd century, someone did. You're in a palace courtyard paved with jade tiles, and at the center stands something that looks like a decorative wine barrel, but weirder. It's bronze, ornate, about the height of your chest. 8 sculpted dragon heads ring the top, each clutching a small bronze ball in its mouth. Beneath each dragon crouches a tiny toad, mouth open, waiting. You're told this isn't just art, it's the world's first earthquake detector. You're in the 2nd century CE, during the Eastern Han Dynasty. And the man behind this device is Zhang Heng, astronomer, engineer, mathematician, and resident polymath who probably made everyone else at the imperial court feel a little underqualified. His invention is called the Hufeng Didong Yi, literally, instrument for measuring the seasonal winds and the movements of the earth, which is a very poetic way of saying earthquake detector. You crouch beside it and stare, skeptical. It just sits there? You whisper, yes. And yet somehow, when a tremor happens, even one you can't feel, one of the dragon's mouths will drop its bronze ball into the waiting toad's mouth below. A soft clink is your only warning, but that tiny sound means everything. One famous story tells of a ball falling from the western dragon's mouth, even though no one in Luoyang, the capital, felt a thing. Days later, a messenger gallops in from the west. A powerful earthquake has devastated a city hundreds of kilometers away. Court officials gape, or Zhang Heng just raises an eyebrow, like, told you. Now, historians still argue how exactly the mechanism worked. Some suggest a central pendulum that shifted with ground motion, triggering internal levers. Others believe there were directional rods suspended inside that detected minute ground vibrations. The truth? Lost to time. But replicas built in modern labs have successfully detected simulated quakes using similar principles. So maybe Zhang was just that good. And what's amazing is the philosophical layer behind it. Earthquakes weren't just physical events. They were cosmic warnings, signs that the emperor's mandate was slipping, a message from heaven that something was wrong with the way things were being run. So, Being able to predict or detect them early wasn't just science, it was survival. You watch a court official take notes next to the bronze barrel. If a ball drops, he'll log the direction, alert the emperor, and initiate relief efforts. Or, if the court's feeling especially theatrical, hold a ritual to realign heaven and earth. Yes, it includes incense. Yes, there's a goat involved. Don't ask. One fringe theory claims Zheng Heng didn't just detect earthquakes. He measured their strength. Some old texts mention him recording tremble scores, like some imperial Richter scale. Skeptics say it's exaggeration, but others point to how eerily precise his directions were. Could be luck, could be magic, or, most likely, math. Now, picture this. While Europe is still praying to saints to stop tectonic tremors, you're watching a toad catch a falling bronze ball and alerting your emperor before the aftershocks arrive. That's next level. But Zhang Heng doesn't stop with earthquakes. No. He's also designing water-powered celestial globes, building armillary spheres to track the stars, and creating the earliest maps of constellations ever recorded in East Asia. You stand beneath one of his sky charts, and it's eerily accurate, even by modern standards. You run your hand along the bronze belly of the seismoscope. It's warm from the sun, cold in the shade, and so meticulously designed you can't find a single visible seam. You imagine a tremor somewhere far away, the pendulum inside shuddering, a lever twitching, a dragon lowering its head in silence. Then, clink. The toad catches the ball. A message sent without words. Prepare. The brilliance of it isn't just mechanical, it's psychological. It warns you in the quietest way possible, and yet it changes everything. And while you're still reeling from that tiny drop of genius, someone walks past carrying a ceramic vase so translucent it glows in the light. You squint. It's not clay. It's not glass. It's porcelain, and you're about to learn why European royalty will eventually go to absurd lengths to steal its secrets. You've never seen anything like it. A moon-pale bowl, thin as a dried leaf, almost glowing under the lamplight. You hold it in your hands, and it hums with quiet elegance, smooth, cool, impossibly light, and yet strong enough to tap like a bell. This is porcelain. And here in ancient China, it's as common in the kitchen as it is in the emperor's dining hall. You're in the Tang dynasty. Maybe the Song. Maybe the Ming. It doesn't matter. Because by now, porcelain is everywhere. You walk past kiln workers covered in white dust, their hands moving with muscle memory born from years of perfecting the formula. A mix of kaolin clay and patunce, that's the secret. You try to pronounce petunce, and end up sneezing from the mineral dust. Careful, that's the magic powder. The firing is done in dragon kilns, long, sloped ovens built into hillsides, with the flames crawling up like a mythological serpent. Temperatures soar past 300 Celsius. That's hot enough to make lesser ceramics melt into soup. But porcelain? Porcelain becomes something else entirely. Translucent, resonant, eternal. You watch a craftsman brush cobalt blue designs onto a vase before firing. A twisting vine, a lotus bloom, a phoenix mid-flight. When it comes out, the blue is seeped into the white, locked under the glaze like a memory frozen in time. You blink. You're holding something that will be unearthed 1,000 years from now and still sparkle like it was fired yesterday. And it's not just beautiful, it's powerful. Porcelain becomes one of China's most valuable exports. It travels the Silk Road in padded crates, wrapped in straw and prayers, bound for Persia, Egypt, even as far as East Africa. Later, it will travel by sea to Europe, where kings and queens hoard it like treasure. Historians still argue whether entire naval treaties were brokered simply to access better bowls. They call it China, because for centuries, that's the only place it came from. You know a product has cultural dominance when your country's name becomes its label, but back at home, it's not reserved for elites. Porcelain shows up in tea houses, bathhouses, temples. It's shaped into everything from inkstone water droppers to spirit tablets for ancestor altars. You visit a shop where even the oil lamps are porcelain. One glows faint pink when lit. The vendor tells you it's peach blossom glaze, and you believe him. There's an entire branch of Taoist thought that suggests porcelain represents balance, strength and fragility, fire and water, earth and sky. You chuckle. Maybe it's just a bowl, or maybe it's enlightenment, poured and fired. Let's talk quirky. In the Ming Dynasty, someone designs a porcelain pillow. Yes, a pillow. Glazed. Decorated. Often shaped like animals. Some say they're good for cooling the head and calming dreams. Others say it's just an excuse for potters to show off. You try lying on one. It feels like napping on a particularly opinionated melon. And don't forget the secret glazes. Celadon, Jun, Tenmoku, some fire green, some blood red, some speckled like quail eggs. Alchemists treat glaze recipes like state secrets. There are even rumors of kilns, where certain colors only appear under a full moon. Historians dismiss it as superstition, but there's always that one bowl that refuses to be explained. Porcelain is also deeply symbolic. White wares for weddings, blue and white for imperial gifts, yellow glaze, reserved for the emperor himself. You get caught sipping tea from a yellow porcelain cup once, and are gently but firmly handed a plain gray one instead. You apologize to the ghost of etiquette and move on. In later dynasties, the imperial kilns at Jingdezhen become legendary. Thousands of workers, each with one task: throwing, glazing, painting, firing. The town becomes a factory before factories existed. Mass production, centuries early. One piece from Jingdezhen could feed a village or start a war. Europe eventually tries to replicate it. They fail, and fail again. One desperate king locks an alchemist in a tower and orders him not to leave until he makes porcelain. It takes years. He finally does, but even then, Chinese porcelain remains the gold standard. Why? Because it's not just about materials. It's about the rhythm of hands that remember. You sip tea from a Song Dynasty cup. The lip curves perfectly. The weight rests exactly where your fingers expect. It's just a cup. But it's also a song of fire, water, and quiet mastery. And next, what time is it? You look around. No clocks. But then you hear a gong from the courtyard. Perfectly timed. Followed by a splash of water from somewhere deep in the palace. That's your cue. Because the Chinese didn't just tell time, they orchestrated it. You follow the sound of water trickling through carved bamboo pipes, past a row of copper bells that shimmer in the early morning light. Then it chimes, the gentle clink of a bronze dragon nudging a floating ball into a bowl. You glance up at a tall wooden tower shaped like a pagoda, with gears the size of ox carts slowly creaking inside. This is no temple. It's a clock, and not just any clock. You're in the Song Dynasty, standing in awe of Susong's astronomical clock tower, built in the 11th century. And honestly, it makes your wristwatch feel like a party favor. This machine doesn't just tell the hour, it tracks the stars, planets, moon phases, and the exact time of day using water, gravity, and pure mechanical genius. The heart of the clock is a water-powered escapement mechanism, a kind of mechanical heartbeat that releases energy in timed intervals. You'll later hear Western engineers in the 17th century claim to have invented this. But here it is, ticking away in a tower built nearly 700 years earlier. You step inside and immediately feel the soft tremble of motion under your feet. Gears mesh, chains pull, water buckets tip in rhythmic cycles. High above, an enormous armillary sphere rotates, charting the heavens. Below, a mechanical puppet system strikes drums and gongs to mark the passage of time. It's not just science, it's theater. Susong's original tower stood over 30 feet tall, with carved wooden gears and bronze weights. It was housed in Kaifeng and considered a technological wonder. Court officials and curious scholars traveled from across the empire to see it. You watch a mechanical man in embroidered robes step forward, raise a stick, and strike a bell. Then, without pause, he retreats behind a screen. You blink. The timing is flawless. And you wonder, how did they figure this out so early? The answer? A centuries-long obsession with celestial harmony. The Chinese didn't see time as just a ticking line. They saw it as a cosmic rhythm, a flow of yin and yang, of heaven rotating above and earth echoing below. A proper government, it was believed, had to move in perfect step with the universe. So accurate clocks were innate luxuries. They were political necessities. And here's the quirky bit. In some regions, especially during the Tang Dynasty, people used incense clocks, long sticks of aromatic incense braided with threads at intervals. As the incense burned, it snapped a thread at a specific time, triggering a bell or releasing a bead. One noblewoman allegedly had her favorite poems read aloud by servants every time a thread broke. You're tempted to try it. Some temples used water clocks with floating figurines that drifted to marked positions. Others built clock walls with pegs and dripping buckets. There was even a version with rotating zodiac animals that would appear at the correct hour. If a rabbit greeted you, it was roughly 5 a.m., but nothing compared to Susong's masterpiece. And get this, the entire thing was designed to be self-resetting. No need for constant manual winding. It just flowed, literally, powered by dripping water and counterweights. A mechanical meditation. Historians still argue why the clock tower was eventually dismantled by invaders. Some say the mechanics were too fragile to move. Others claim the secrets were lost because Susong died before he could rebuild it. Whatever the reason, the fact remains, the West wouldn't see anything like it until the 14th or 15th century, and even then, theirs didn't come with robotic puppets dressed like Confucian officials. And, if you're thinking, surely they weren't using this stuff in warfare. Oh, just wait. Because in the next chapter, someone decides to take rocket tech and make it loud, airborne, and mildly terrifying. You're about to witness ancient China's first experiments with missiles. There's smoke in the air. Not the gentle kind from incense or dragon kilns. This smoke stings your nose, clings to your sleeves, and crackles with something wild underneath. A soldier shouts. Another ducks behind a wooden barricade, and then it launches. A streak of flame arcs into the sky, trailing sparks behind it like a furious comet. You've just witnessed the fire-breathing chaos of a rocket, not the sleek metal missiles of modern times. but something much cruder, stranger, and yes, absolutely real. It's the 13th century, during the Song Dynasty, and you're standing in the middle of a secret military training ground where China's most experimental weapons are being tested. You duck just in time to avoid a fire arrow, an early version of a rocket propelled by tightly packed gunpowder inside a bamboo tube, lashed to a shaft of wood. It's a little wobbly, occasionally explosive, but undeniably ahead of its time. But yes, this isn't some random battlefield fluke. These rockets are part of organized warfare. Chinese military manuals from the period, like the Wujing Zongyao, carefully describe how to build, pack, and launch rocket arrows, gunpowder ratios, tube dimensions, flight angles. It's all documented, centuries before anyone in Europe even considers attaching flames to a stick. You wander into a makeshift armory. Inside are rows of bamboo cylinders stacked like wine bottles. Soldiers prepare flying crow rockets, some with attached wings to stabilize flight. A few even feature multiple tubes tied together, a medieval version of a rocket launcher. One soldier lights 3 at once. They sputter, wheeze, then burst into a frantic corkscrew flight that nearly takes off a general's hat. No one blinks. Welcome to rocket training. And these aren't just showpieces. The Song and later the Yuan dynasty used them in actual warfare. Rockets are deployed to defend cities, attack enemy camps, and confuse advancing troops. Some are mounted on carts. Others are launched from fortified walls. One version, known as the fire dragon issuing from the water, is a rocket-propelled missile shaped like a dragon's head, complete with painted teeth and smoke billowing from its nostrils. Is it accurate? Not really. Is it terrifying? Absolutely. One fringe tale from a 14th century chronicle tells of an entire rocket barrage launched during a siege on a Mongol outpost. The sky lit up like a fireworks show gone rogue, and panicked horses trampled their own riders. Historians still argue whether the account is exaggerated, but something tells you that if it is, it's not by much. By the Ming Dynasty, engineers are designing even more elaborate rocket systems. You spot one called the Nest of Bees, a wooden frame holding 32 small rockets bundled together, designed to launch in rapid sequence. A rotating version fires in a circle, like a rotating sprinkler system of destruction. Another model uses a whirling wheel mechanism to fling rocket arrows while simultaneously spinning, just in case regular chaos wasn't chaotic enough. And here's the fun twist. Some of these rockets are seaworthy. Naval commanders strap powder rockets to small skiffs and launch them at enemy ships. One manual includes instructions for making your own waterproof fuse using beeswax and oil paper. You watch a test run. It launches, wobbles, splashes, then explodes in a flash of orange so bright it reflects off a nearby pond. Birds take off. The crowd cheers. Let's not pretend it was all smooth sailing. These things exploded early, veered wildly off course, and occasionally ignited their own launch platforms. One unfortunate soldier is remembered in a poem for becoming the first man to ride the sky unwillingly. Still, you can't deny the brilliance. And the philosophical side. Oh yes, it's there. Some officials write that rockets echo the will of heaven, burning a direct line between earth and sky. Others describe their sound as thunder given form, useful not only for battle but for scaring off malevolent spirits. Military and mystical lines blur. Meanwhile, over in Europe, the closest thing is a flaming catapulted pot, or, if you're lucky, a Greek fire accident waiting to happen. Rockets? That's science fiction. until Marco Polo strolls back with tales of Eastern weaponry that sound a little too fantastical. No one believes him until it's far too late. You stand at the edge of the training field as dusk falls. A final rocket is lit. It winds into the air, trailing sparks in a spiral. It bursts, not with an explosion, but with a soft pop and a tiny banner fluttering down. A message? A warning? A joke? You pick it up. It reads, "Nice try. Enemy." You chuckle. Of course, ancient China would invent psychological warfare too. And speaking of strategy, what if money didn't need to weigh 1,000 pounds? What if you could fold it and slip it into your sleeve? Next up, the surprising rise and chaos of paper money. You're standing in a bustling Song Dynasty marketplace. Silk banners flutter, incense smolders, and hawkers shout over the clatter of wooden abacuses. A man at a tea stall hands you a steaming cup and extends his palm, not for coins, but for something lighter, flimsier, and far more revolutionary. A piece of paper money. It doesn't look like much. It's printed with fine black calligraphy, framed with red seals, and bears the official stamp of the Imperial Treasury. You hold it to the sun. No watermark. No hologram. Just ink on mulberry bark paper. But somehow, this slip is worth 10 strings of copper coins. You do the math. That's hundreds of clinking discs you don't have to carry in your sleeves or drag on a donkey. You nod. This might actually be genius. Welcome to Jiaozi, the world's first true government-issued banknote. We're in the 11th century, during the Northern Song Dynasty. The empire is booming. Trade has exploded. Markets span from Hangzhou to Baghdad. But there's a problem. Copper coinage is heavy. Like, really heavy. A single big transaction could require wheelbarrows of coins, ones that wear holes in your robes and your patience. Merchants in Sichuan are the first to rebel against this inconvenience. They begin issuing private notes as promissory currency, essentially IOUs backed by local trust. Eventually, the government sees this and thinks, hey, we can do that, but bigger. And just like that, the state steps in and creates the first centralized paper currency system in history. You read the note more closely. It says, authorized by the Treasury Office of Chengdu, forgers will be beheaded. Ah yes, the fine print. You slip it back into your sleeve a little more carefully. These notes are made of tough, fibrous paper. Some are printed with multiple inks, official seals, intricate designs, an early form of anti-counterfeiting. You watch a clerk press a carved woodblock down onto a fresh sheet. It squeaks, lifts. Another bill is born. By the time of the Yuan dynasty under the Mongols, paper money becomes empire-wide. Kublai Khan mandates its use. Traders from Venice to India are expected to accept it, or else. Historians still argue whether the West fully understood how advanced this system was. Marco Polo, for one, couldn't stop talking about it. The great Khan makes his money from tree bark, he wrote, equal parts amazed and baffled. And here's the twist. It worked. For a while, paper money streamlined trade. You could travel hundreds of miles with 10 notes instead of 10 bags of coins. It enabled rapid commerce, tax collection, even state salaries. Some versions had expiration dates to prevent hoarding. Others came in denominations so large they made modern inflation blush. You pass a tax officer counting stacks of bills. Nearby, a counterfeiter is being loudly scolded while someone adjusts the chopping block. Paper may be light, but it's also dangerous in the wrong hands. There's even a fringe rumor about a wandering magician who forged bills so perfectly they fooled the emperor himself, until one note mysteriously changed characters overnight, revealing its true origin. Truth or ghost story? Who's to say? Eventually, though, things wobble. Overprinting, corruption, military overspending. It all starts to pile up. The government prints more bills to cover deficits. Inflation spirals. By the late Yuan era, people begin rejecting paper money. Some prefer silver again. Others bury their savings in clay jars. You hear an old man mutter, "Better the weight of copper than the emptiness of bark." Still, the legacy remains. Centuries before Europe even flirts with banknotes, China has already mastered, broken, and learned from the experiment. The Ming Dynasty will try again. The Qing too. It's a cycle of trust, betrayal, and innovation. Modern banking. Eat your heart out. You tuck your note into your belt. It crinkles softly. You could use it to buy a duck, a scroll, a ride on a riverboat, or just keep it as a souvenir from a world that understood value before the West could spell finance. And speaking of value, what about something softer? Something that feels like wealth between your fingertips? You pass a field, shimmering in the breeze. It isn't gold. It isn't jade. It's silk. And it's about to seduce the world. You reach out and touch it, smooth, cool, impossibly soft. A single strand slips between your fingers, lighter than breath and stronger than it looks. It shimmers faintly in the morning light, changing hue as it moves. This isn't thread. It's a secret, a treasure, a quiet revolution spun by worms. This is silk, and for over 2,000 years, China guarded its secret like it was divine knowledge, and in a way, it was. You're in the fields just outside of Chang'an, under the shade of white mulberry trees. Beneath them, trays of silkworms munch away like lazy aristocrats at a banquet. They eat only mulberry leaves, and only fresh ones. Thank you very much. The worms grow fat, then still, then begin to spin, each one excreting a single thread of protein up to 1 kilometer long. When the cocoon is done, it looks like a ghostly egg, fragile, delicate, and brimming with potential. Then comes the moment of truth. The cocoons are dropped into hot water, softening the gum that binds them. You watch as a woman in a wide straw hat carefully unspools a thread using nothing but a finger, a brush, and an iron will. The silk shines like moonlight. The process is mesmerizing, almost sacred. According to legend, the first silk was discovered by Empress Lei Zhu, wife of the Yellow Emperor, when a cocoon fell into her tea and unraveled in the hot water. She pulled at the thread and imagined something more than just a stray fiber. She saw elegance, a gown, an empire's future. Historians still argue how much of that is myth and how much is embroidered truth. But Leizu remains the spiritual mother of sericulture. By the time you arrive, silk is everywhere, worn by nobles, used to pay taxes, offered as tribute to foreign envoys. It's not just fabric, it's currency. The Tang Dynasty even has an official term for it: soft gold. Silk becomes China's most coveted export. Through the Silk Road, it travels west to Persia, Byzantium, and eventually to the trembling fingers of European elites who have never felt anything like it. They drape it over their heads, hang it on their walls, whisper rumors that it must grow on magical trees tended by monks. Spoiler: it doesn't. Meanwhile, you're watching silk weavers at their looms, working in perfect silence. The rhythm is hypnotic: shuttle, pull, knot, tighten. Some patterns take weeks to finish, others, months. A single imperial robe can require hundreds of thousands of meters of silk thread. It's dyed with indigo, safflower, and crushed minerals. The embroidery? Tiny dragons, cloud motifs, waves cresting beneath phoenixes. In the capital, only certain classes can wear silk. Officials are ranked by color and motif. A fish pattern might mean fourth rank. A flying crane? Second. The emperor? Dragons. Always dragons. You accidentally wear a sash with 5 claws on its embroidered beast, and a guard raises an eyebrow. You tuck it away, you like your neck, and don't think it's all robes and curtains. Silk is used for writing too. Before paper went mainstream, early scrolls were made from silk sheets. They were expensive, fit only for imperial decrees or sacred texts. There's something haunting about seeing a poem written on silk, the ink bleeding into the threads, the words dancing with the fabric's folds. Want a fringe tidbit? Some Taoist alchemists claim that drinking dew collected on silk would enhance longevity. Others claim that a bolt of undyed silk worn under armor deflected evil spirits. Was it protective? Probably not. Was it fashionable? Absolutely. Of course, China tried to keep the process secret. Revealing how silk was made was punishable by death. For centuries, the monopoly held. No one knew it came from worms. No one outside China could replicate it. The mystique made it even more valuable, but secrets leak. Eventually, legend says 2 monks smuggled silkworm eggs hidden in bamboo staffs to Constantinople in the 6th century CE. From there, the West began to experiment, but they never quite matched the finesse. Not for centuries. Even today, the phrase "made in China" on silk still means something. You sit down at a market stall, brush your fingers over bolts of fabric dyed in shifting tones: peach blossom pink, emperor's yellow, sky before thunder gray. The merchant smiles. He knows you've never felt anything like this, and as the sun dips, you tie a silk ribbon in your hair, not because you need to, but because you can. Next, you'll look up and see a kite dancing in the sky, and realize it's not just a toy, but a spy, a message carrier, and a symbol of flight long before hot air ever lifted a man. You hear it before you see it, a thin fluttering, like a bird too shy to sing. Then, rising above the rooftops of Luoyang, there it is, a brilliant red kite, soaring on the back of the spring wind, its silk tail twitching like a brushstroke come to life. You tilt your head. It dives, banks, rises again. You think, that's just a toy. And then someone hands you a scroll and tells you to tie it to the string. Turns out, kites aren't child's play here. In ancient China, they're tools, messages, measurements, and military surveillance, centuries before balloons, blimps, or spy planes ever hit the sky. You're in the Warring States period, around the 4th century BCE. The earliest written record of a kite credits a philosopher and engineer named Mosey, the same Mosey who believed in universal love and defensive fortifications, not necessarily in that order. He's said to have crafted a wooden kite that flew for an entire day and night. Did it glide gracefully, or crash into a pine tree like your first attempt? Historians still argue. The earliest designs are called Mu Yuan, or wooden birds. Some are rigid, carved from bamboo and stretched with oiled silk. Others are collapsible, fold in like fans. You see them shaped like eagles, bats, dragons, even serpents with articulated joints. One model has a whistle attached so that it sings when the wind is right. It sounds like a ghost caught in a flute. During the Han Dynasty, kites begin to serve military purposes. Generals launch them above enemy camps to measure distance, using the angle of the kite string to triangulate how far their troops need to march. Others tie lanterns to them at night to create confusion or false signals. Imagine a floating torch flickering like a will-o'-the-wisp in the dark. One general even sends a kite loaded with firecrackers over a wall and lights the fuse mid-air. The result? Chaos and, presumably, a promotion. Later, during the Tang and Song dynasties, kite culture explodes. Artisans create flying creatures with flapping wings, silk feathers, painted faces, and spinning reels. You attend a spring kite festival where scholars, merchants, even monks compete for height and distance. One man launches a dragon so long it takes 6 people to keep it balanced. Children cheer. Your neck hurts from staring up so long. But the sky isn't just for fun. You meet a Taoist priest who believes that sending a kite into the air helps dispel illness, carrying bad energy up into the clouds. Others write prayers or poems on tiny slips of paper, attach them to the string, and release them when the wind pulls tight. If the paper breaks free, it's a sign the heavens accepted your wish. You release one of your own. The string jerks, and the slip flutters away. You feel oddly lighter. In the southern provinces, fishermen use kites to lure birds, who think the hovering shapes are hawks and flee toward the nets. In one village, a young woman ties a message to a kite and flies it across a river to her forbidden lover. It works. He replies. Suddenly, the sky becomes a postal service, long before stamps and uniforms. Here's your fringe tidbit. There's a legend of an emperor who used a kite to spy on rebellious ministers. The kite carried a tiny bamboo tube, fitted with a polished bronze mirror angled downward. Primitive drone? Maybe. The story ends with a handful of officials retiring early and a new emphasis on indoor meetings. You try flying one yourself. It's trickier than it looks. The wind pulls, the frame rattles, but then, lift. Your arms tingle as the string tightens, and the kite climbs higher than you thought possible. It dances beside birds, floats between clouds. For a moment, it's not just a kite, it's an idea. Light, free, clever. And you realize this: while the rest of the world was tethered to the ground, China had already started sending things into the sky. Not with wings, not yet, but with imagination. You lower your reel, carefully winding the string. The kite dips and descends. A child runs to catch it. The wind shifts. And below your feet, there's another invention just as clever, though much harder to spot from above. Because beneath the earth lies something ancient, deep, and just as valuable as flight: salt, and the genius bamboo machinery used to bring it up. The ground here smells sharp, briny, mineral-rich, a little like the ocean got trapped underground and forgot how to escape. You're standing beside a wooden derrick taller than a house, and rising from it is a hollow bamboo pipe, slick with condensation. A man cranks a winch. A deep gurgling comes from below. Moments later, brine, thick, pale, and salty as tears, bubbles up from the earth. Welcome to the ancient Chinese salt fields and deep well drilling systems, where engineers aren't just harvesting flavor, they're bending geology to their will. You're in Sichuan province, somewhere between the 2nd and 1st century BCE. The mountains loom in the distance, but here in the lowlands, the real treasure lies underfoot. Underground salt deposits, buried hundreds of meters deep. The solution? Bamboo drilling rigs. So sophisticated they'll baffle Western engineers for centuries. You duck under a scaffolding of ropes, pulleys, and spinning rods. Everything smells faintly of hemp oil and burning incense. Nearby, a team of workers turns a horizontal wheel that drives a long spring pole percussion drill, a giant bamboo whip that rhythmically pounds a sharp iron bit into the earth. With every bounce, the shaft dives deeper, the sound echoing like a heartbeat through the mud. It's not quick. Some wells take months, even years to drill. But when they strike brine, the celebration is instant. Fires are lit. Drums are beaten. Children smear salt paste on their cheeks for good luck. You are, quite literally, striking white gold. Now here's the kicker. Some of these ancient wells reach depths of over 1,000 meters. That's deeper than most modern oil wells. And the entire apparatus is built from bamboo. Lightweight, flexible, and surprisingly durable. The drilling rods, the casings, even the piping systems that carry brine to the surface are all lashed and fitted together with handmade joints. No nails, no steel. Once the brine is drawn up, it's fed into giant evaporation pans, sometimes heated with natural gas bubbling from the same well. Yes, you heard that right. The Chinese were using natural gas centuries ago. Clay pipes delivered it straight from the earth to the salt boilers. Some even had valves made from leather flaps and sliding bamboo switches. You stare at one and wonder, how did no one else think of this? Historians still argue whether the knowledge of drilling and gas piping developed in tandem or if one inspired the other. Either way, the engineering is dazzling. Some systems even used counterweighted buckets and mechanical lifting cranes to pull heavier loads with ease. And don't assume this was all grunt labor. The salt wells were supervised by skilled technicians, men who understood geology, chemistry, fluid dynamics, and pressure regulation. Some came from families who passed their knowledge down like sacred texts. Their diagrams, preserved in Song Dynasty manuals, are detailed enough to rival Renaissance blueprints. Want a quirky footnote? There's a tale of a well driller who struck a dragon vein, a pocket of high-pressure gas. His bamboo rig exploded into flames, launching part of it into a nearby orchard. The workers saw it as a sign that the salt there was blessed. They rebuilt immediately. Today we'd call it a safety hazard. Back then, a cosmic endorsement. Salt itself wasn't just seasoning, it was currency, tribute, and monopoly. Dynasties controlled salt production like a sacred tax. Smuggling it was punishable by death. Using counterfeit salt, practically treason. You pass a merchant who whispers about black market brine. You nod politely and step away. In everyday life, salt was survival. It preserved fish, flavored soup, paid soldiers, and cleansed wounds. A jar of it could feed a family or fund a rebellion. Some regions even used pressed salt cakes as official currency. You hold one. It crumbles slightly. Tastes like history. Very salty history. Later, in the Qing dynasty, when European observers were finally allowed into Sichuan's salt fields, they were speechless. One Dutch engineer supposedly stared at a bamboo gas valve for half an hour before muttering, "But we only just thought of this." You imagine him crying into his wig. You walk through the steam rising off brine pans, watching as the water slowly evaporates and leaves behind a crust of glittering salt. It sparkles in the late afternoon sun like snow that forgot how to melt. The workers rake it into piles. Children pack it into woven baskets. You taste a grain, pure, sharp, ancient. And as the sky darkens, a healer arrives at a stall nearby. He carries a silk pouch filled not with salt, but with needles, thin, glinting, and carefully arranged like musical notes. Because next, you'll learn how the Chinese turned the human body into a map and healing into a language of pressure, flow, and balance long before anyone in the West believed in energy lines. You're lying on a bamboo mat in a quiet room that smells of mugwort and sandalwood. Candlelight flickers. Somewhere nearby, water drips slowly into a ceramic basin. The healer's fingers press gently along your forearm. Then, without warning, he inserts a needle, thin as a strand of hair, precise as poetry. You barely feel it, and yet your whole body sighs. Welcome to the ancient world of acupuncture, where health is not a matter of chemistry or surgery, but of balance, flow, harmony. We're in the Han Dynasty, sometime around 200 BCE, and you're in the care of a zhongyi, a traditional physician trained in the mystical topography of the human body. He doesn't ask what hurts. He takes your pulse, examines your tongue, listens to your breath. Then he nods gravely and tells you that your liver qi is rebelling against your spleen. You blink. He starts pulling out more needles. Acupuncture isn't new here. It already has centuries of tradition. Ancient texts like the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of medicine, describe a body crisscrossed by invisible channels, meridians, through which qi flows. When qi stagnates, you get sick. When it flows freely, you thrive. So, naturally, the answer is to poke the right places with fine metal pins until the energy cooperates. Logical, right? You might expect some grand mystical drama, but it's all so calm. The needles are inserted shallowly, sometimes just a few millimeters on those, They go into your ankle for your headache, your wrist for your stomach, your back for your sadness. You feel tingles, warmth, a floating sensation, then silence. And here's the wild part. It works. Not every time, not for everyone, but in many cases, especially chronic pain, nausea, migraines, it does something. Even modern Western studies begrudgingly admit it helps, even if they're still bickering over how. Historians still argue whether acupuncture's effectiveness lies in nerve stimulation, placebo, or actual energy flow, but it's hard to argue with 2,000 years of clinical anecdote. You meet patients who swear their vision improved, others who stopped coughing. One woman says she dreamed of her dead grandmother after a needle was placed behind her ear. She cried for 3 days, then stopped getting panic attacks. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe not. The tools are elegant. Ancient needles were made of stone, then bronze, and eventually refined steel. Some are tiny, like slivers of moonlight. Others are heavier, used for deep tissue or, brace yourself, draining abscesses. You're told not to flinch. You flinch anyway. There are fringe techniques too. Fire acupuncture, where the needle is heated before insertion. Ear acupuncture, where the entire body is mapped onto the folds of the ear. Scalp acupuncture, used in stroke recovery. And moxibustion, where dried mugwort is burned near or on the skin to warm and stimulate points. You watch the smoke curl upward. It smells earthy, almost sweet. You feel oddly clear-headed. And the diagnosis methods? Nothing like you're used to. Physicians might analyze the tone of your voice, the brightness of your eyes, even the rhythm of your pulse at 6 different locations, each representing a different organ. There's a specific pulse for damp heat, and another for blood deficiency. It's a language of touch, one most modern doctors have long forgotten. In elite circles, acupuncture becomes part of a holistic regimen. Emperors undergo seasonal treatments, needling to adjust to shifts in weather, avoid spiritual imbalance, or increase virility. Palace doctors keep records of every treatment. There's even a tale of an emperor who believed that one acupuncture point, known as Bai Hui, at the crown of the head, could open the gate to divine wisdom. He demanded daily needling there. Whether it worked is unclear, and yes, there's gossip. Some practitioners are so skilled, they're said to cure broken hearts, revive failing marriages, or even spark prophetic dreams. A wandering Taoist healer is rumored to have treated a homesick court lady with just 3 needles and a bowl of chrysanthemum tea. She never cried again. You take a deep breath. 10 needles now hum in your skin like antennae. You feel your limbs float. Your mind stills. The healer adjusts one slightly and murmurs, "Your key is moving now." You want to believe him. You do. And then, it's over. The needles are removed. No blood. No pain. Just a strange sense of having been recalibrated. You rise, lighter than before. You thank the healer. He bows slightly, and you step outside into the warm air. A wooden ship is pulling into the harbor. You hear shouting, orders, chain clinks, but there's no sail. Instead, you see great paddle wheels churning the water, driven by cranks and steam. Your jaw drops, because next, you'll board a naval machine so advanced it leaves pirates trembling, and it runs on nothing but brilliant Chinese mechanics. The harbor reeks of salt and tar. Waves lap against barnacle-crusted docks, and gulls screech overhead like tiny, airborne gossips. But your attention is locked on the thing approaching through the mist, a towering wooden warship, carved with snarling dragons and painted with streaks of red and black. It glides across the water, no sails, no oarsmen, yet it moves, and fast. Then you see it, 2 enormous paddle wheels, one on each side, rotating in smooth rhythm. They churn the water with mechanical precision, powered not by wind or muscle, but by a complex system of human-operated treadmills. You're witnessing one of China's most formidable military inventions, the paddle wheel ship, perfected during the Tang and Song dynasties, centuries before Europe even dreamt of naval propulsion. You step aboard. The deck thrums beneath your feet. Below, crewmen march inside enclosed treadmills, their steps turning axles connected to the paddle wheels. It's hot, loud, and smells like old vinegar and boiled leather, but it works. The ship lurches forward, defying the current, able to navigate against wind and sprint upriver. This isn't just a ship, it's a weapon, a floating fortress. And in an age when pirates plague the seas, and river control means regional dominance, it's a game changer. China's naval tech had been developing quietly for centuries. The earliest paddle-driven designs appear in the 5th or 6th century CE. But by the 10th century, during the Song dynasty, engineers get ambitious. These aren't fishing boats with ideas, they're war machines. Some ships carry flamethrowers. Others mount crossbow turrets. One even has a revolving roof for deflecting arrows. Flamethrowers? Yes, you heard right. The Chinese invented an early version called the fire oil sprayer, which used a double piston pump to eject burning petroleum from a bronze nozzle. You see one mounted to the bow. A crewman grins at your expression and says, Don't stand too close. And it gets better. These ships are part of naval squadrons, with signaling flags, synchronized maneuvers, and rotating patrols. Fleet commanders use colored smoke, drum codes, and semaphore fans to give orders mid-battle. One admiral is rumored to have coordinated 18 paddle ships in a crescent formation that encircled a pirate armada and burned every vessel to the waterline. The battle lasted an hour. The pirates surrendered wet and barefoot. You walk past a central map table on deck where an officer adjusts wooden models of islands and river bends. The strategy is layered: water depth, current flow, wind direction, all calculated. This isn't brute force, it's elegance in motion. And yes, this tech terrified people. Foreign envoys from Korea and Southeast Asia described Chinese warships as floating dragons. Some pirates reportedly fled at the mere sight of paddle wheels, believing them to be spirit-driven. One folk tale even tells of a Song Dynasty admiral who rode into a storm aboard his paddle ship, vanished, and was later seen in a dream, still steering, forever patrolling the Eastern Sea. Historians still argue whether these paddle wheel ships were used for long sea voyages or mainly inland river warfare. The Yangtze, Pearl, and Yellow Rivers were the primary theaters. But archaeological evidence and court records hint that coastal defense squadrons were absolutely a thing. You descend into the belly of the ship. It's all rope pulleys, gear cranks, oil pots, and bamboo scaffolding. Crew members maintain the axles, greasing the wooden parts, and replacing worn tread belts. One shows you a foot brace harness that reduces fatigue. You try it. It's humbling. Even naval logistics are advanced. Ships are stocked with preserved tofu, vinegared vegetables, dried fish, and, of course, tea bricks for morale. Some vessels include portable mills to grind rice mid-journey. Water tanks are rigged with sand filters, and sleeping compartments are ventilated with woven reed panels. And if you're wondering, yes, there were female crew members, though not many. Some served as navigators, medics, or signalers. One Song Dynasty record mentions a woman nicknamed Iron Fan, who once held off 6 pirates with a spear and was later promoted to quartermistress. You find her story engraved in the mess hall. Back on deck, the ship rounds a bend in the river, a narrow passage ahead. In a single fluid motion, the left paddle slows while the right speeds up. The vessel turns on a dime, making a mockery of the windbound junks nearby. A young officer smirks and whispers, "Let them have sails. We have legs." You lean against the rail, eyes on the shore. It's astonishing, this level of engineering, control, and coordination, all centuries before the West builds anything comparable. But for all its brilliance, even this ship has its limits. Paddle wheels are strong, but fueling humans takes food, endurance, strategy. So, what if the bridge ahead collapses? What if your ship can't dock? Well, then you just build the bridge yourself, right across the river. Even if it floats, you're perched on the riverbank, expecting to see a ferry, or maybe a rope-pulled raft. Instead, you watch in stunned silence as an entire bridge floats downstream, planks swaying gently, pilings bobbing like obedient turtles, and locks itself into place, across the water with a soft clack. Congratulations. You've just seen the brilliance of ancient Chinese floating bridge engineering, the kind of logistical wizardry that lets armies cross rivers without waiting on the weather, or divine intervention. You're in the Han Dynasty, maybe later in the Tang or Song, and this isn't a one-off. Floating bridges, also known as pontoon bridges, are a regular part of China's civil and military infrastructure. They're elegant, scalable, and, most importantly, mobile. You look again. The structure isn't stone or even wood pilings driven into the riverbed. It's a chain of boats, lashed together by heavy rope and topped with flat wooden planks, forming a road over moving water. The engineering is genius. The boats are evenly spaced, noses pointed slightly upstream to break the current. Between them, wide crossbeams support thick planking that stretches across the river like a ribbon. The bridge bends, shifts, flexes, but holds. Carts roll across. Horses trot confidently. One impatient goat decides to nap in the middle. Historians still argue where China's first floating bridges were built. Some say the concept came from military campaigns during the Warring States period. Others point to earlier Chu Kingdom innovations. But what's clear is this: the Chinese didn't just build floating bridges, they mastered them. You walk along the length of one now. It creaks gently underfoot. On either end are anchoring stations, massive drums wrapped in hemp ropes and iron hooks dug into the riverbank. A team of laborers mans a series of pulleys and winches, adjusting tension as the water rises or shifts. This thing breathes with the river, but it's not just for soldiers or wagons. Entire temporary cities spring up around major floating bridge sites. Vendors line the banks, selling steamed buns, tea, shoe repairs, Lucky Charms. One scholar sets up a table mid-bridge and writes calligraphy for tips. Another performs dramatic recitations from the Book of Odes while balancing on a fishing pole. It's a vibe. During wartime, floating bridges give generals the upper hand. You overhear an old man talking about a battle where the Song army deployed a multi-section bridge overnight to flank an invading force at dawn. The invaders were still sharpening their spears when thousands of troops appeared behind them. Tactical surprise? Achieved. Some bridges stretch over 1 kilometer long. Made with hundreds of boats. When rivers swell with floodwater, engineers raise the planks, slacken the ropes, and add counterweights to keep the structure from snapping. One version even uses modular pontoons carved from cedar and waterproofed with lacquer, making the whole bridge fire-resistant and buoyant, even under siege. Here's your quirky tidbit. One Tang Dynasty festival involved decorating floating bridges with lanterns, wind chimes, and embroidered banners, turning the span into a glowing nighttime walkway. Couples strolled hand in hand across the river, hoping the gentle sway would bring them romantic luck. You spot a teenage couple doing just that right now. She trips slightly. He catches her. Works every time. The Ming Dynasty takes it further, designing drawbridge pontoons that can be lifted mid-river to allow boats through. A rotating hinge system, all powered by foot treadles and weighted beams. You try pulling one up. It's harder than it looks. You let a fisherman do the honors instead. Floating bridges even make their way into art and poetry. One song poet writes, "The river flows, the bridge rests, yet the people pass without pause." You scribble it down on a scrap of parchment. That's the kind of casual wisdom you'll pretend was your own later. And when it's time to disassemble, takes hours, not days. Boats are unlashed, beams stacked, and everything floats downriver to the next crossing point. It's a mobile road system, in an era when some parts of the world still think bridges are witchcraft. You step off the bridge and turn around. The whole thing sways gently behind you. a thing alive, not in spite of the river, but with it. And as you walk back toward land, you spot something curious in a nearby stall, a soft-looking bundle of what seems like silk, but it's not for wearing. It's tucked neatly beside a small ceramic pot, a jar of rose water, and, wait, is that a drying rack? You squint, then you laugh, because next, you're about to discover the invention no one in the West wants to admit they didn't think of first: toilet paper. You step inside what looks like a bathhouse, half expecting to find hot towels and herbal steam. Instead, you find rows of low wooden seats, each with a neat stack of soft paper squares beside it. No confusion, no muss, no corn cobs, seashells, moss, or other creative alternatives used elsewhere in the ancient world. Just paper for wiping. You've arrived in the Tang Dynasty, and you're about to witness something that would change the course of comfort forever. The invention of toilet paper. Yes, really. While much of the world is still figuring out hygiene with whatever's lying around, leaves, wool, water jugs, the occasional unlucky rag, China is already producing dedicated personal hygiene paper, and doing it in bulk. Your host, a well-fed scholar official with a scroll tucked under one arm and dried plum in the other, casually mentions he's ordered a batch of 10,000 sheets for the month. You raise an eyebrow. He nods solemnly. There is no greater betrayal, he says, than coarse paper. The earliest known references to toilet paper date back to the 6th century CE in court records and personal diaries. By the 14th century, during the Yuan dynasty, entire production lines were churning out hundreds of thousands of sheets annually, especially for imperial use. The paper was made from rice straw, bamboo fiber, and mulberry pulp, coarse, but soft enough when treated right. In the Ming dynasty, palace records mention a batch of 720,000 sheets, each roughly 2 feet by 3 feet, designated solely for the royal posterior. That's not hygiene. That's luxury logistics. And no, they weren't using leftover scrolls or tax documents. In fact, a Tang official once scolded his servant for using a draft copy of a Confucian commentary as toilet paper. "It is one thing to soil yourself," he wrote, "but quite another to soil the words of sages." The paper was unscented for commoners, but for the emperor and high-ranking nobles, think sandalwood-infused, aloe-treated, or even rose-petal-dusted sheets. One Song Dynasty empress allegedly refused to use paper unless it had been rested in moonlight. You suspect she was just picky. Here's your quirky tidbit. A group of Buddhist monks in Sichuan were once criticized for printing scripture on toilet paper by mistake. The resulting scandal was dubbed the Scroll Affair. It's unclear whether it was an honest error or an act of passive-aggressive heresy. Either way, it didn't go over well. Toilet paper wasn't only in elite homes or palaces. Urban bathhouses provided it as part of their service, along with hot water, herbal oils, and the occasional gossip pamphlet. You even spot a traveling merchant with a bamboo paper holder tucked in his sash, today's version of pocket tissues, and the sanitation didn't stop there. In wealthier homes, ceramic toilet pots were cleaned with vinegar and lime water. Public latrines often featured drainage systems linked to nearby streams, and some had privacy curtains made from reed mats. Is it glamorous? No, but it's wildly ahead of its time. Historians still argue why China embraced paper hygiene so early, when other cultures took centuries to follow. Was it the abundance of raw material? A cultural preference for cleanliness? Or maybe just good old common sense? Europe, by comparison, wouldn't embrace toilet paper until the 19th century, and even then, not enthusiastically. In the meantime, Chinese travelers reportedly carried rolls with them abroad, sometimes causing confusion, sometimes envy. One Jesuit missionary in the 1600s noted, "Their method of cleansing is both delicate and efficient. You try a sheet yourself. It's thick, fibrous, slightly textured, not plush by modern standards, but bokcharsei, but absolutely luxurious compared to pine cones. You fold it respectfully. Use it with the dignity of someone who knows they've skipped several centuries ahead of their time." Nearby, a boy is cutting squares from a dried paper reel with a small bronze blade. His grandmother eyes each piece, nodding or shaking her head before they're stacked. "For the shrine," she tells you. "Even the ancestors deserve comfort." You smile. Of course they do. And maybe that's the heart of it. In a world that built bridges over rivers, launched rockets into the sky, and captured earthquakes in dragon mouths, it's this quiet little square of softness that tells you something deeper. That invention isn't always about grandeur. Sometimes it's about making daily life just kinder. But hold on. You're not done. Because just when you think nothing else can surprise you, an old man pulls a wooden cart over a rocky hill. On it, a bronze carriage with wheels that turn, but never spin freely. The whole contraption moves forward, and yet one figurine atop it never stops pointing south. You're about to meet the south-pointing chariot, a compass-powered miracle that defies both terrain and time. The wheels creak as the wooden chariot rolls over uneven stones, but your eyes are fixed on the figurine mounted atop the roof, an outstretched arm, calm and unmoving, always pointing south, no matter how the cart turns, twists, or reverses. That arm doesn't waver. You walk in circles around it, still south. This isn't sorcery. This is the legendary south-pointing chariot, an invention so old, so strange, and so elegant that even today, engineers scratch their heads and whisper, "How do they do that?" We're deep in the Warring States period, possibly earlier, though most sources trace the chariot's heyday to the Three Kingdoms era, and later the Tang and Song dynasties. And here's the twist. This isn't a magnetic compass. There's no lodestone, no needle, no magnetism at all. The entire system works mechanically, through gears, ratios, and absurdly clever design. You crouch to examine the underside of the cart. There it is, an ancient differential gear mechanism, similar in principle to what you'd find in modern cars. As the wheels turn, the system calculates the difference between left and right rotations and adjusts the pointer's position accordingly. Turn left, the gear shifts to keep the figurine aimed south. Turn right, same result. You feel like you're looking at something from a steampunk fever dream, except this was built over 1,000 years ago. The oldest account attributes the invention to the Yellow Emperor's minister, but more concrete descriptions come from the 3rd century strategist Zhuge Liang, who supposedly deployed the device to guide his army through foggy, mountainous terrain. Whether he improved an older design or simply popularized it, historians still argue. But what's clear is that this wasn't a novelty. It was a navigation breakthrough. You watch the chariot in action. It bumps along a forest path, guided by 2 men, one steering, one watching the pointer. As the road curves, the arm adjusts. No hesitation, no compass needed, and no stars, no sun. That's the real genius. It works in complete darkness. In military campaigns, the chariot proved invaluable. Commanders could orient themselves during night marches, through dense mist, or under forest canopies. One general is said to have led an entire division out of an enemy ambush using nothing but the pointer and sheer confidence. You imagine the enemy's face. They followed a wooden doll? Yes. And they lived. The pointer itself is symbolic, often shaped like a robed gentleman, a phoenix, or a stoic guardian. On this one, the figure wears a scholar's cap, with one hand extended and the other tucked neatly behind its back, like it's politely offering directions. You're charmed. You also don't dare touch it. Rumor has it these figures are blessed by geomancers, and moving them invites directional misfortune. Probably superstition. Probably. You learn that later models were outfitted with cushioned axles, bronze flywheels, and even shock absorbers made from coiled bamboo to handle bumpy terrain. Some elite versions came with silk banners and jade fittings, reserved for emperors and high-ranking envoys. Others were plainer, built for utility, their wooden frames oiled with sesame paste to resist warping. One merchant you meet claims to use a miniature chariot, palm-sized and carved from sandalwood, to orient his family altar. A man should never eat facing the wrong way, he says, straight-faced. You believe him. There's even a fringe theory that the south-pointing chariot was used in theater, to guide performers on darkened stages during late-night palace plays. A small cart rolled silently across the floor, the figurine's arm indicating entrances, cues, or where the invisible emperor was seated behind a screen. Could be real, could be lore. Either way, it's delightfully dramatic. And let's not ignore the philosophy. In Chinese cosmology, south is sacred, the direction of warmth, growth, and imperial virtue. The emperor's throne faced south. Temples were aligned to it. So the very act of building a device that never lost its southern bearing, that wasn't just navigation. It was ideology, in motion. Historians still argue why the invention eventually faded. Some blame its mechanical complexity. Others suggest the rise of magnetic compasses made it obsolete. Or maybe it was simply too elegant, too precise, for a world that didn't always know how to appreciate that kind of quiet genius. You trail the chariot down a wooded path. The sun dips low, the birds quiet. The figurine's hand glows faintly in the dusk, still pointing south, still reliable. You feel like it's leading you somewhere important. And it is, because soon you'll enter the final stretch of this journey. You'll find yourself in a bustling workshop where artisans aren't making one masterpiece at a time, but many in a rhythm that feels suspiciously modern, because long before factory floors and assembly lines, China figured out how to mass-produce brilliance. The smell hits you first: burned lacquer, hot glue, sawdust, and steamed rice paste. Then comes the sound: clack, scrape, clang, repeat. It's not chaotic. It's rhythm, coordinated, precise. You step into the heart of an ancient Chinese manufacturing workshop, and for a moment you forget you're in the past. You're in the Song dynasty, but what you're seeing could easily pass for something out of the early industrial age. Rows of workers, each assigned a single task. Pass parts down the line: paper, pottery, weapons, even bronze mirrors. You've just walked into a world of mass production, centuries before the term was ever coined. One worker shapes the clay, the next applies the slip, another paints the design, someone else glazes, and finally, A team hauls the batch to a giant dragon kiln built into a hillside where thousands of ceramic bowls are fired in a single blaze that lasts all night. You peek inside and see racks stacked with identical wares, glowing orange in the heat. This isn't some quaint village craft fair. This is centralized, scaled up production, complete with quality control, supply management, and shipping logistics. The Song government didn't just encourage this kind of efficiency, it institutionalized it. Take the famous Jingdezhen porcelain workshops. By the 11th century, they were churning out millions of ceramic pieces per year. Officials kept spec books detailing dimensions, glaze colors, and required inscriptions. Artisans were trained in just one part of the process and rotated based on seasonal demand. If this feels suspiciously like an assembly line, it's because it is. You walk past a printing shop where entire teams work on block printing sutras and manuals. One inks the block, one lays the paper, another pulls the print, someone else hangs it to dry. You flip through a finished batch, identical pages, near perfect alignment, bundled and ready for binding. It's so efficient it hurts. You've waited longer for coffee. At a swordsmith's forge, metalworkers follow a template to craft blades that meet army standards. If a blade doesn't pass the flex test, twisted 90 degrees without snapping, it's recycled. You see a pile of failures that would be considered elite collector's items today. Want something more niche? Try musical instruments, like the guqin and bamboo flutes. One man carves the wood, another hollows it, a third tunes it by tapping and listening for resonance. Each craftsman signs their work, but the final instrument bears only the brand of the workshop. This isn't about ego, it's about consistency. And the output isn't just for elites. You visit a lacquerware factory producing affordable utensils for peasants. Cheap, durable, attractive. One foreman tells you they export to 5 provinces. Another says they've begun using a flat painting style to save pigment. Cost control meets aesthetic innovation. You raise your eyebrows. The man shrugs. Margins. Even government documents are mass-produced. Edicts, calendars, tax receipts, all printed using carved blocks or hand-copied by bureaucratic scribes working in shifts. Some administrative offices operate 24/7, rotating scribes like nurses on call. One man brags that he's written the phrase, "grain tax delay denied," over 5,000 times. You believe him. Here's your fringe tidbit. There are reports of standardized doll production, small clay or wood figures used in festivals, funerals, or even medical teaching. One batch is so uniform that later archaeologists mistake them for machine-made, and yet, all handcrafted. Just consistently. Historians still argue whether this constitutes a true industrial revolution. There's no steam engine here, no fossil fuel economy. But the principles are there. Division of labor, specialization, workflow efficiency, market response, and the logistics, wild. Caravans carry finished goods to ports, where they're loaded onto massive junks and sent across the maritime Silk Road to Japan, India, Arabia, even East Africa. At customs stations, goods are logged, taxed, and sent off again. You see officials using handwritten SKU lists, essentially spreadsheets on bamboo. One merchant hands you a porcelain chopstick rest, delicate, identical to the hundreds beside it. He smiles. Every piece from the same hand, he says. You ask how long it took? He shrugs. We finished 10,000 last month. You realize this isn't just productivity, it's philosophy. Confucian order made physical, harmony through repetition, precision as virtue. And now, as your journey through ancient Chinese invention nears its end, you pause. You look back at what you've seen. Ink that flowed before the West could write. Paper that democratized knowledge. Printing that copied wisdom like wind spread seeds. Compasses, rockets, clocks, needles, wheels, bridges. Kites in the air, salt from the earth, fire in tubes, porcelain on waves, and the calm, unwavering hand of a south-pointing chariot guiding you the entire way. You smile because you've seen the truth. This isn't a story of isolated miracles. It's a tapestry of ideas, all connected, all deliberate, all centuries ahead of their time. So let's wind down together. You lean back now, away from the buzz of kilns and gears and bamboo-piped salt wells. The night sky stretches overhead, silver and still. A soft breeze rustles through mulberry trees nearby, and somewhere far off, a gong echoes faintly from a watchtower. You imagine the sound rippling across a porcelain bowl, stirring the ink of a half-written poem. It's peaceful here. The inventions are resting. 2. No smoke from the rocket tubes. No whisper of paper under brush. No click of needle or paddle. Just the quiet legacy of brilliance left behind by generations who thought not just of survival, but of elegance, precision, and lasting beauty. And as you close your eyes, you carry with you more than facts or footnotes. You carry a feeling that somewhere long ago, humanity crafted a better future, not with machines or greed, but with care, with curiosity, with a brushstroke on silk, a drop of brine, a perfectly balanced wheelbarrow. So if you ever find yourself thinking progress is new, or that wisdom only runs forward, remember this moment, and how far back genius really goes. Sleep well, traveler. The past will still be here when you wake. End of script. Sweet dreams.